For years, we have been told that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, a vital component of a healthy lifestyle. However, what we have been told is nothing but lies. Breakfast companies have fed us the lie that we have to eat something in the morning if we want to survive the day. But they're not pushing breakfast for our benefit, it's for their pockets. And by the time you're done with this video, I'm pretty sure that you'll agree with me. To start with, eggs and bacon on toast have made an appearance on the breakfast table in many American homes since as far back as the 19th century. Back in the day, this was a breakfast of choice because it was what was available. People lived on farms and could access eggs, and toast wasn't all that difficult to come by. However, that's not the only reason that eggs and bacon on toast were breakfast staples. And the other reason had, and still has, to do with the bacon part of the breakfast. Unlike with eggs where the chickens do most of the work, getting bacon ready for breakfast isn't exactly something one can do every morning. But bacon was still available every morning, thanks to the company Beechnut. Beechnut produced what it marketed as the choicest parts of the most perfectly cured bacon, which were readily available in markets. All people had to do was cook the eggs and bacon for a couple of minutes, and they had their breakfast ready. Nobody was competing with Beechnut at the time. They were the undisputed king of the breakfast market. But the Industrial Revolution changed everything. And with that change came the lies from the breakfast industry. People started moving out of farms and into the cities where work was more sedentary. As a result, the heavy breakfast thing, with bacon plus eggs and toast, was no longer working. People started experiencing indigestion and something called dyspepsia, which was a prevalent stomach disorder that doctors said was caused by heavy breakfasts. Most likely, the problem stemmed from the fact that people did not move often enough after eating heavily, but that's beside the point. The point here is that as the cases of indigestion grew, bacon sales plummeted, putting Beechnut in dire need of a solution to salvage its pockets. And while they were trying to figure out what to do, another breakfast contender came into the scene. John Harvey Kellogg, a radical Seventh-day Adventist and businessman, had some interesting ideas during the early 1900s. He saw sexual desires as something that needed to be tamed or completely eradicated, and he believed that food was the best way to go about it. Not just food though, a bland, dry, and unstimulating diet was what he recommended as an antidote to sexual desires. And this led to his brother, Keith Kellogg, creating cornflakes. Kellogg's cornflakes became an instant hit. And the reason that this happened was because Kellogg's capitalized on the issues that people were having with the previous kind of breakfast, bacon. There are 1,000,001 other foods that people could have eaten instead, but Kellogg's wasn't about to let that happen. So, they marketed their cornflakes as having some kind of magic cure to the dyspepsia that people were experiencing. People did stop experiencing dyspepsia after switching to cornflakes. But it was certainly not because cornflakes are some kinds of miracle like Kellogg's would have people believe. Most likely, indigestion and other negative symptoms stopped because while people were not moving more, they were eating less. It wasn't anything, particularly about cornflakes, but you wouldn't know how popular cornflakes got. Cereal companies quickly realized the power of advertising and embarked on extensive marketing campaigns to establish their dominance. Through captivating television commercials, colorful packaging, and character mascots, they created a direct connection between their products and the idea of a complete and wholesome breakfast, a breakfast that would never give you indigestion. Children were particularly targeted, with cereals becoming synonymous with fun and excitement, backed by appealing toy promotions and tie-ins with popular cartoons. Beechnut did not take this lying down, though. It had been the king of breakfast for many years and was not willing to drop the crown. At least, not without a fight. Enter Edward Bernays, the master of mass psychology and propaganda. Bernays was tasked with reviving the bacon industry. So, he devised a brilliant campaign to reshape public behavior towards bacon. His strategy was to attack the reason people switched from bacon to cornflakes. Bacon is heavy and a heavy breakfast gives you indigestion. First, he got a doctor on his team to admit that a heavy breakfast is theoretically better than a light breakfast. And this kind of makes sense because a heavy breakfast should keep you feeling fuller and give you more energy throughout the day than a light breakfast. So, the one doctor agreed to a heavy breakfast being preferable. And with that doctor's quasi-endorsement, he got thousands of other doctors to do the same based on the same principle. That was all he needed to change people's minds. Headlines read that thousands of doctors agree that a heavy breakfast is better than a light breakfast. And even though a lot of context was missing, it was enough to convince people to bring back their breakfasts of eggs and bacon on toast. I think we are easily convinced by massive campaigns. Meanwhile, cornflakes did not lose much ground. It had managed to carve a niche for itself at this point that no aggressive bacon marketing could shake. The fact that people had less time to prepare breakfasts before rushing off to work and the fact that children were now heavily into cornflakes must have been some of the reasons why cornflakes stood their ground. Now, many years after the bacon crisis, bacon has more competition than just cornflakes. The breakfast market has become a battleground for whoever cares to fight. Practically every restaurant chain now has a breakfast option that is marketed hard, sometimes at the expense of its competitors. And people eat it up, literally. We can talk about how the highly processed nature of many breakfast options has led to an overall decline in the nutritional value of American diets. Obesity rates are skyrocketing, so there is an increase in an array of related health problems including diabetes, high blood pressure, and sleep apnea. But who is thinking about all of that? Breakfast is important, but we are all busy. So, having all these easy-to-reach options is great, right? Wrong. As I mentioned earlier, the idea of breakfast being important is something that was popularized by breakfast companies. The statement, "Breakfast is the most important meal of the day," was coined and popularized by the notorious John Kellogg. Breakfast is not that important. For one, some people just don't feel hungry in the morning. They end up just eating because they have been fed the lie of the indispensability of breakfast. Also, if you go back in history, you'll find that most people only ate one big meal a day, and the idea of 3 meals per day is not exactly a scientific fact that nutritionists agree on. However, I must mention that the problem is not breakfast but the kind of breakfast. In most places outside of America, the people that eat breakfast eat actual food in reasonable quantities. Breakfast is whatever they have on hand to cook. But American breakfast includes red meat, processed food, and a lot of artificial sugar. All of which are controlled by big breakfast companies. That said, transforming entrenched dietary habits is challenging. The breakfast industry continues to prioritize profits over health, bombarding consumers with enticing advertisements for products that may be detrimental to their well-being. Achieving a shift towards healthier breakfast choices requires a collective effort, including informed consumer decision-making, government regulation, and responsible advertising practices. So, we might as well just resign to our fate and continue stuffing our faces with bacon and cornflakes.